Have you ever wondered where angels go when they fall? Not metaphorically, but truly fall, stripped of glory, severed from light, and cast into a place not meant for anything divine. The Book of Enoch, a forgotten scripture hidden away for centuries, speaks of such a place. A prison, not for men but for angels. Yes, you heard that right. A fallen angel's prison. Enoch wasn't just a man. He was a witness. Chosen to walk the unseen realms with Uriel, the archangel of wisdom. His feet tread paths where no mortal had ever walked. Mountains made of flame, rivers that burned, stars that whispered. And yet it was not the fire or the void that shook him most. It was the silence of a desolate land, a place where even angels dare not look. This was no ordinary wasteland. It was sterile, barren, and consumed by darkness, untouched by time, untouched by God's warmth. And there, Enoch saw the prison, a spiritual Alcatraz, buried beyond the ends of the earth where the Watchers, those celestial beings who defied heaven, were chained. Uriel spoke, his voice like thunder wrapped in sorrow. Here shall stand the angels who have connected themselves with women. Here they will stand till the day of great judgment. In that one moment, everything changed. The myth of perfect angels crumbled. The illusion of divine invincibility faded. Enoch saw that even angels, beings forged in heavenly light, could choose wrong. And when they did, their punishment was more terrifying than death. But what exactly did Enoch see in that place? Why were these beings condemned? What did it feel like to stand in the shadow of their eternal suffering? And most haunting of all, if angels can fall, what hope is there for us? What you're about to discover is not just a story. It's a revelation, a cosmic warning buried in the oldest scrolls, long before the flood, long before the cross. So take a breath, because once we cross the threshold into the fallen angel's prison, there is no turning back. Let's begin. They were not supposed to fall. They were angels, crafted in brilliance, robed in light, assigned with purpose, and saturated in the presence of the Most High. And yet, they fell. They descended not only from heaven but from favor, from righteousness, from the divine order. And in the ancient vision granted to Enoch, a truth was unveiled that even many today still struggle to comprehend, that these heavenly beings, exalted and majestic, are judged by the same standard as you and I. Uriel's voice echoes through the ancient scroll. Here shall stand the angels who have connected themselves with women until the day of the great judgment. It wasn't merely a poetic warning. It was a declaration of justice. Heaven's justice. You see, we often imagine angels as immune, incapable of failure, above temptation, vessels of unshakable holiness. But the Book of Enoch shatters that illusion. In its pages, the veil is pulled back. The Watchers, once glorious custodians of heaven, traded eternity for moments of forbidden desire. And for that, they were bound, not just by chains of flame, but by the law of divine justice that governs all creation. It's uncomfortable, isn't it, to think that even angels, those closest to God, are held accountable. But perhaps it's also comforting, because it means God doesn't play favorites. His justice isn't biased. It's not built on status or celestial origin. It's rooted in truth, in righteousness, in love that refuses to be manipulated. Enoch stood in that dark place, surrounded by silence that screamed louder than thunder. He saw beings who once walked among stars, now buried beneath judgment. And as he listened to Uriel speak, a realization crept in. If they were judged, so will we. But what does that mean for us? Let me tell you a story. There was once a pastor, beloved by his congregation, known for his eloquent sermons and charitable works. To the outside world, he was as close to an angel as a man could get. But behind closed doors, he harbored secrets, manipulation, pride, and a quiet addiction to power. He thought, perhaps, that because he was used by God, he would be spared. That judgment was for others, not for the pulpit. But eventually, the cracks widened. The truth surfaced. And the very community that once admired him saw the fall of a man who believed he was untouchable. Now imagine that, but on a celestial scale. The Watchers weren't petty angels. They were of the highest order. They stood before the throne. They knew the secrets of the universe. But when desire entered their hearts and rebellion followed, they too were judged. Not because God is cruel, but because righteousness demands consistency. This is where divine justice differs from human revenge. It doesn't seek to crush, it seeks to restore order. And sometimes that means removing what has corrupted the design. Uriel, in his solemn tone, tells Enoch, "They will stand until the day of great judgment." He doesn't say they'll be instantly destroyed. No, they're given time to understand. Time to sit in the weight of their own decisions. 10,000 years of reflection. A slow, unyielding process of accountability. It's a mirror for us, isn't it? How often do we think we can outrun consequences? We delay confession. We justify choices. We tell ourselves, surely God understands. Surely he'll overlook this one. But Enoch's vision makes it plain. God's mercy is vast, but his justice is not negotiable. And here's where the lesson deepens. The angels were not ignorant. They knew the cost. They had seen Lucifer fall. They had watched the consequences unfold in eternity. Yet they still chose. Which means they weren't forced. They exercised free will. Yes, even angels have free will. This breaks a lot of traditional thinking. We assume angels are like robots, divine messengers, void of emotion or choice. But the Book of Enoch tells us differently. The Watchers chose desire. They chose rebellion, and in doing so they chose judgment. Now, if free will exists even in heaven, what does that say about the weight of our choices on earth? In a way, the fall of the Watchers is a cosmic echo of Eden. Just as Adam and Eve were given paradise and still chose the forbidden, so too did these celestial beings. Temptation is not reserved for the weak. It comes for the wise, the powerful, the spiritual. And that is why judgment exists, not to shame, but to remind all creation. You were made with purpose, and purpose requires accountability. So here's the lesson tucked in the ancient scrolls, waiting to be rediscovered. God is not looking for perfection. He's looking for obedience. He's not impressed by title, position, or power. He's moved by humility, by those who hear his voice and follow, even when it's hard. You might be a leader, a parent, a teacher, a friend, and maybe you feel the pressure to appear flawless. But Enoch's vision whispers something different. Don't chase the image of holiness, chase the heart of it. Because the angels who fell were beautiful, they were radiant, they were respected. And still they fell. Let that sink in. Holiness isn't about appearance. It's about alignment. Alignment with truth. Alignment with God. Alignment with the way you were created to walk. As Enoch watches the fallen, burning stars trapped beneath the earth, his fear grows, not because he doubts God's goodness, but because he understands its weight. And in that fear, holy fear, comes wisdom. Maybe that's the real takeaway here. Judgment isn't meant to paralyze you, it's meant to awaken you. To remind you that the same breath that formed stars now lives in you, And with that breath comes responsibility. Uriel didn't share this vision to scare Enoch. He shared it to prepare him, to anchor him, to commission him with a message that still echoes through the ages. Do not be deceived by glory. What matters is obedience. And that truth, it applies to angels, it applies to prophets, and it applies to us. Now, as Enoch steps further into the prison, guided by Uriel's unwavering steps, a darker mystery unfolds. The judgment of the watchers is only the beginning. For deep within the earth, bound in chains of divine fire, lie others, 7 burning stars, their transgression different, and their sentence marked not by eternity, but by 10,000 years. Why? Why are some punished forever, while others are given a set time? What did these 7 do to earn fire but not finality? What secret does this deeper chamber hold? Let's follow Enoch and see what lies beneath. There's a certain chill in the air now, isn't there? As we descend deeper into the story, following Enoch and Uriel into the shadows of divine judgment, we come face to face with the cause, the moment heaven touched flesh, a seduction forbidden, yet willingly embraced. This wasn't just a rebellion, it was intimacy, twisted. The Book of Enoch doesn't spare details. The Watchers, angels of high rank, left their assigned place in the heavens and descended, not to preach, not to guide, but to pursue the daughters of men. What began as desire became obsession, and what began as fascination became sin. But this wasn't just about lust. No, it was about crossing boundaries set in eternity. Uriel had already revealed the consequence: eternal imprisonment. But now we must ask, why was this act, the union of angel and human, so devastating, so forbidden, so irreversible? Let's return for a moment to the very beginning. In Genesis 1, God declares that all creation should reproduce after its kind. Separation was divine order, stars in the heavens, beasts of the field, man in God's image. But the Watchers defied that blueprint. They bridged the unbridgeable. Angelic essence, eternal by nature, was never meant to mingle with mortal blood. And yet, it did. And from that union came the Nephilim, giants of old, mighty and terrible. Beings born from 2 realms, belonging to neither. And as history moved forward, their presence became a curse upon the earth, corrupting nations, destroying purity, and leading mankind further from the Creator. It started with a glance, a desire, a whispered lie that this won't matter. But it always matters. We see this reflected even now. No, we don't have angels descending in bodily form, but we do have compromise. We do have spiritual beings, ideas, influences, powers that seduce us from our purpose. Every time we cross a line we swore we'd never cross, we echo the fall of the Watchers. You see, sin doesn't usually arrive in full armor. It comes wrapped in beauty, in longing, in the appearance of something good. Let me tell you a story. There was a young woman, faithful, prayerful, pure. She longed to serve God with her whole life. But one day, a man came into her world. He was charming. He quoted scripture. He knew how to speak her language. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, her convictions began to soften. He loves God, she told herself. He just needs time. But time passed, and he didn't rise. She fell. What she thought was love was a counterfeit. And when she awoke from the illusion, she was no longer the woman she used to be. That's what happened to the women in Enoch's day. Whether seduced or deceived, they became part of a divine tragedy. And the judgment was severe. not just on the angels, but on the women too. Uriel says something chilling. And the women also of the angels who went astray shall become sirens. Sirens, creatures of myth, half woman, half monster, known not for their beauty alone, but for their ability to lure others to destruction. But why? Why would God allow such a transformation? Perhaps it wasn't a punishment in the traditional sense, but a reflection, a physical manifestation of a spiritual distortion. When something holy becomes unholy, when love becomes lust, when trust is twisted into manipulation, what once was beautiful now becomes a warning. Still, many have asked, were the women truly at fault? Weren't they victims? And it's a fair question. The watchers were glorious, majestic, persuasive. To resist such beings would have been like asking a child to ignore the sun. And some scholars believe these women were taken, not wooed, that they had no say. If that's true, then the judgment on them seems harsh. But others argue differently. They say these women were willing, that they believed the angels were messengers of God, that their union was somehow sacred. And maybe that's the greatest danger of all, believing a lie that wears a robe of light. Deception often doesn't look evil, it looks divine. And so the line blurs. Were they seduced or did they surrender? Were they prey or participants? We may never know the full truth. But what we do know is this: the moment we step outside of God's design, even for something that feels right, we invite consequences we were never meant to carry. This is not just ancient history. It's modern reality. Marriages are broken because of slow compromises. Ministries collapse because of unchecked desires. Lives are derailed not by explosions, but by whispers. That's why the story of the Watchers matters. It's not just about angels and giants. It's about us. It's a mirror, a warning, and yes, even a mercy. Because hidden within the ashes of their judgment is a blazing truth. God cares enough to draw lines, not to punish us, but to protect us. He knows where fire starts. He knows where destruction begins. And sometimes, the most loving thing he can do is say no. Enoch saw this, and though the scenes before him were horrifying, he didn't turn away. He watched, he listened, he learned. And so must we. Because the story isn't over. Beyond the sirens, beyond the women, beyond even the watchers, lies another mystery. 7 burning stars. Angels of a different category, chained together, engulfed in fire. But unlike the watchers, their sentence had an end. 10,000 years. Why? What did they do? And more importantly, what does their story reveal about God's justice? Let's take one more step deeper. The flame is growing brighter. And what lies ahead may change the way we see heaven and ourselves, shall we? Enoch took another step, and the light changed. The first prison he saw, the wasteland where the watchers were chained, was dreadful, yes. But now he had arrived at something far more terrifying. A place where even heaven seemed absent. No sky above, no ground beneath. Only chaos, fire, and 7. And I saw 7 stars of the heaven bound together in it, like great mountains and burning with fire. 7 stars, 7 angels, once radiant, now reduced to embers in a pit without end. They weren't just confined, they were entangled. Their glory scorched away, their light swallowed by flames that never rested. And here, Enoch asked the question any of us would. For what sin are they bound? Uriel doesn't blink. These are of the number of the stars of heaven, which transgress the commandment of the Lord, and are bound here till 10,000 years, the time entailed by their sins, are consummated. 10,000 years. Unlike the Watchers who are imprisoned forever, these 7 have a set term. Not days, not decades, but 10,000 years. It's a number so large, so distant, it feels eternal, and yet it isn't. Why the difference? Why is one group condemned without end, while another is allowed a final hour? Some scholars believe that the Watchers' sin, taking human wives, corrupting mankind, birthing giants, was so catastrophic that it required irreversible judgment. It altered the course of history, brought about the flood, and nearly erased the human line altogether. But these 7, their sin is unnamed, and that may be the point. Sometimes, the most haunting crimes are not those shouted aloud, but those buried in silence. The ones we feel but cannot name. The ones that fester in the dark and consume from within. Their fire is constant, but their sentence is not. So what did they do? Some traditions suggest they were angels assigned to the stars, literal guardians of celestial order, and in their pride, they abandoned that post. Others say they were part of a separate rebellion, smaller than the Watchers, but no less defiant. Perhaps they attempted to elevate themselves, another echo of Lucifer's fall. Whatever it was enough. Enough to be bound. Enough to burn. But also, enough to warrant a limit to their punishment. That detail is crucial, because it reminds us of something easily forgotten. Judgment is not the absence of mercy. Even in his wrath, God remembers mercy. The 10,000 years aren't merely a number, they're a design. A boundary, a timer set not to torture, but to transform. Imagine being one of those 7. Day after day, century after century, your only companions are flame, silence, and regret. No distractions, no escape. Only memory. Maybe that's the greatest punishment of all. Not the fire, but the clarity. The realization of what you were, of what you became, of what you lost. And here lies a powerful truth for us. Sometimes we mistake consequences for cruelty. We say, "Why would God allow me to suffer?" When in reality the suffering is grace, because without it, we might never change. I once knew a man who lost everything: his career, his marriage, his reputation. To the outside world, it looked like the end. But in that quiet, lonely place, his own 10,000 years, he met God. Not the God he preached about, but the one who sees in darkness, who speaks through silence, who heals through fire. And when that season ended, he was new, not restored to what he had before, but reborn into something better. That's what makes this part of Enoch's vision so extraordinary. It's not just a scene of judgment, it's a whisper of hope, a glimpse of God's unwillingness to give up entirely. Even when angels fall, he draws lines. Even when fire burns, he marks an end. But don't mistake that hope as leniency. The fire is real. The suffering is real. The justice is real. But so is the promise. And what's more, the fire wasn't only for them. Enoch doesn't just witness their punishment. He feels it. He trembles. His human soul recoils at the spectacle of celestial beings reduced to ash. And when he voices his fear, Uriel, calm and unmoved, replies, "Why hast thou such fear and affright?" It's a strange moment, isn't it? Uriel doesn't console. He doesn't explain. He simply observes Enoch's fear, almost as if to say, "This fear is part of what you must learn." Because until we understand the weight of judgment, we can't comprehend the beauty of mercy. And that's what this chapter teaches us. Fear isn't the enemy. In fact, in Scripture, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Fear reminds us that actions matter, that choices echo, that sin is not a myth but a wound, and every wound, if left untreated, becomes infection. So as we stare into the flames with Enoch, watching these 7 angels burn, we're not meant to gloat. We're meant to reflect. What chains are forming in our lives? What desires are drawing us away from our assignment? What pride whispers, "You'll never be caught"? Because if angels can fall, so can we. And if fire was their teacher, perhaps conviction should be ours. But the vision doesn't end here. There is still one place left. One more descent. A chamber even darker, even more terrible. Enoch writes, "And from thence I went to another place, which was still more horrible than the former, full of great descending columns of fire. And what he saw there would shake his soul to its core. Not just burning stars, but an abyss so deep, so violent, that no mind, angelic or human, could fully comprehend it. So shall we go deeper still? Let's walk with Enoch into the very mouth of the abyss, and see what God reserves for the end of all rebellion." The air thickened. Enoch, already shaken by the flames and fetters of the burning stars, now found himself being led further, deeper. If the last place was judgment, this was despair. Uriel did not speak. He didn't need to. The silence spoke enough. "And from thence I went to another place, which was still more horrible than the former," Enoch writes. "And I saw a horrible thing, a great fire there which burnt and blazed, and the place was cleft as far as the abyss." There are moments in life when words fail us, when what we see can't be neatly explained or placed into categories. This was such a moment. Enoch tried to describe it. Columns of fire, burning ceaselessly, descending into a depth he could neither measure nor imagine. But no metaphor was enough. It wasn't just fire. It wasn't just darkness. It was the absence of presence. The terrifying void where even hope refused to dwell. And in that endless chasm, souls were falling. Forever. He doesn't tell us their names. He doesn't tell us their crimes. He only tells us what he saw and what he felt. "How fearful is the place," he whispered, "and how terrible to look upon." And this time, Uriel answered, not as a judge, but as an observer of divine order. "Why hast thou such fear and affright?" It's an honest question, almost curious, as if Uriel, in all his heavenly knowledge, could not comprehend why a mortal would be so shaken. But perhaps that's the point. Angels are not like us. They do not see pain as we do. They do not experience the fall as we do. To them, the flames are justice. To us, they are terror. Uriel's tone was not cruel. It was distant. He stood where judgment was normal, while Enoch stood where mercy had always been his hope. That contrast, it's everything. Because it reminds us that judgment is real, not symbolic, not poetic. Real. Enoch was not hallucinating. He was not seeing metaphor. He was bearing witness to divine consequence. And we, in our modern comfort, often forget what he could not. There are places, real places, where rebellion ends. Not with a slap on the wrist, not with a second chance, but with silence, chains, and fire. This place is the prison of the angels, Uriel finally says, and here they will be imprisoned forever. No appeal, no parole, no resurrection, forever. That word rings heavy, doesn't it? In a world where everything is temporary, relationships, news, pain, joy, we forget what forever means. But Enoch saw it. He felt it. The eternity of consequence. And suddenly, The fall of the angels wasn't some myth for Sunday school. It was a mirror held up to mankind. Because if this is what became of the most powerful beings in the cosmos, what about us? What happens when we ignore the voice that whispers, "Don't go there"? What happens when we make compromise our daily habit? What happens when we laugh at holiness? This abyss, this pit of punishment, isn't just about the fallen angels. It's about us. It's a warning painted in flame, a love letter soaked in judgment. A map that says, "Do not follow this path." And Enoch, though trembling, did not look away. We mustn't either. Let me ask you something. Have you ever stood at the edge of your own abyss? Maybe not literal fire, but a season so dark, so hopeless, you could not see the bottom. There was a man I met once, brilliant, successful, respected. But behind closed doors, he battled addiction, the kind that eats at your soul while you smile in public. He told me, it wasn't the pain that scared me, it was the silence. It was knowing that if I died in that silence, no one would even know who I really was. He had stood at the edge of his own abyss, and by grace, he stepped back. Enoch didn't have that luxury. He had to look. He had to remember. He had to carry that vision not only for himself, but for generations who would never see it. You and I, we get to choose. We get to read these ancient words and respond. We can harden our hearts, or we can tremble with wisdom. Because if even the angels tremble, shouldn't we? And yet in all this darkness there is something else, hidden, small, faint, but undeniable. Hope. You see, Enoch didn't descend into the abyss alone. He was led, guided, protected. Uriel never abandoned him, even when he didn't understand, even when he was afraid. Even when the flames licked the sky and the earth cracked beneath his feet, Uriel walked beside him. And if God would send an angel to walk with one man through the prison of the damned, he will walk with you through yours, no matter how dark, no matter how far, because beyond the judgment, beyond the fire, beyond even the abyss, there is still more to the story. The Book of Enoch doesn't end in torment. It ends in restoration, in justice fulfilled, in a world remade. But before that, before the healing, there is something else you must see. A transformation more unexpected than any so far. The women. The angels, the watchers, all were judged. But what about those who rise? What about the righteous? What about the souls who, despite everything, choose light? The next part of Enoch's journey reveals a different kind of angel. Not fallen, not burning, but guiding, lifting, restoring. And in their story, we just might find our own. Shall we continue? Darkness can be overwhelming, but it is never the end. When Enoch lifted his eyes from the abyss, what he saw next was not more punishment, but purpose. A shift, a breath of heaven. For not all angels had fallen. Not all wings had been scorched by lust or chained in flame. Some still stood, righteous, radiant, ready, and their role, not to destroy but to guard, to heal, to restore. And in that moment, Enoch writes, the angel showed me the holy ones who are set over the spirits of men. One by one, Uriel names them. Uriel himself, over the world and over Tartarus. Raphael, over the spirits of men. Raguel, who takes vengeance on the world of the luminaries. Michael, who is over the best part of mankind and over chaos. Sarachael, who is over the spirits who sin in the spirit. Gabriel, who is over paradise and the serpents and the cherubim. Remiel, set over those who rise. This list is more than a roll call. It is heaven's answer. For every angel who fell, another stood. For every rebellion, an assignment. And perhaps that's the most beautiful truth hidden in the Book of Enoch. God doesn't just judge. He reinforces, he redeems, he restores order through holy resistance. Let's begin with Uriel. Not only Enoch's guide, Uriel is said to be over the world and Tartarus, the very abyss we just left. He oversees it, not to torment, but to make sure chaos never escapes its cage. Uriel is the watcher of the watchers, the protector of boundaries that the fallen once crossed. Then Raphael, whose name means God heals. He is over the spirits of men. Imagine that. In a world where angels once corrupted mankind, God places one who heals at the heart of human souls. Raphael doesn't just monitor, he mends. And perhaps that's why he's later depicted, even in other scriptures, as the one who binds Azazel and cures blindness. His role is to fix what rebellion broke. And then there's Raguel, a name you may not have heard before, but one that echoes justice. The friend of God. He is the one who takes vengeance on the world of the luminaries. The luminaries, sun, moon, stars, are often symbolic of heavenly beings. And in the Book of Enoch, stars sometimes refer to angels themselves. Raguel is the one who confronts celestial corruption. Imagine that, an angel assigned not to humanity, but to other angels. A divine internal affairs department, a guardian of heavenly integrity, a reminder that justice starts in the highest places. Next, we meet Michael. Michael needs no introduction. The warrior, the general, the defender. But here, his role is unique, over the best part of mankind and over chaos. Think about that. The best of humanity, those walking righteously, are not left to fend for themselves. They are under divine protection. But also, Michael oversees chaos. Not just battles, but disorder itself. In the places where your life feels scattered, where nothing makes sense, Michael stands. You may not see him, but the hand of heaven pushes back the storm so you can keep walking, so you can keep breathing. Then comes Sarakiel. He is over the spirits who sin in the spirit. That phrase has puzzled many. Some say it refers to demons. Others say it's about humans who sin not with their flesh, but with their soul, through pride, bitterness, hatred, corruption of the heart. Sarakiel's role is not to destroy them, but to manage them, to make sure they don't exceed the limits allowed. Even sin, you see, has boundaries in God's world. Even rebellion is restrained. Gabriel follows. His assignment is vast: paradise, serpents, and cherubim. That's heaven, hell, and the guardians in between. He watches the good. He watches the wicked. He watches the watchers. Why? Because Gabriel is the messenger. He doesn't just deliver words. He carries truth between worlds. He knows what angels are doing. He knows what demons are whispering. He knows what man is choosing. And when the time comes, he speaks. Loudly, clearly, prophetically. Finally, Remiel. Oh, Remiel. His name means mercy of God. He is set over those who rise. Let that sink in. Not over the perfect, not over the holy. Over those who rise, those who stumble, but get back up. Those who fall, but repent. Those who burn in their own abyss, but still whisper his name. Remiel is the angel of resurrection, of return, of renewal. And that, perhaps more than anything, is what this entire journey has been leading to. Yes, the Book of Enoch shows us judgment. Yes, it shows us the horrors of rebellion. Yes, it makes us tremble at the abyss. But it also shows us this: there are angels assigned to lift us. There are forces in heaven, not just to punish evil, but to empower the good. And when we look around this world, with all its chaos, confusion, temptation, it's easy to feel outnumbered. But we're not. You are not alone. There are angels standing at the gates, guarding, praying, fighting, leading. And if you'll listen, if you'll quiet your soul long enough, you might just hear their whisper in the wind. Not every angel fell. Some stayed. And they stayed for you. So the question is no longer, why did the angels fall? The real question is, why do you still stand? Because someone is watching, someone is hoping, someone is fighting for you to rise. But before we end our journey, there is still one final mystery to unfold, a chapter often overlooked, a prophecy hidden in the fire, a vision given to Enoch not just about angels, but about what happens next. The judgment wasn't the finale. It was the warning. What God does after changes everything. Shall we go one more step? To where the scroll closes and eternity begins. There's a kind of silence that doesn't settle. It stirs. After the names of the archangels had been spoken, after Enoch had seen the prisons, the burning stars, the abyss, and the watchers chained in eternal flame, there was still one thing left. A final glimpse, a last descent. But this one wasn't about punishment. It was about what punishment reveals. In chapter 21 of the Book of Enoch, the prophet is taken to a place still more horrible than the former, and he beholds something even more terrifying than 7 stars on fire or the sirens that once sang from heaven's edge. He sees the final fire, a cleft in the earth, a place split all the way down to the abyss, columns of fire roaring, not rising but descending, as if the earth itself had been torn open and light from heaven was falling, not sent to illuminate, but to consume. Neither its extent nor magnitude could I see, Enoch writes, nor could I conjecture. And maybe that's the point. Some things aren't meant to be measured. Some things are only meant to be felt, in the soul, in the gut, in the trembling of one's bones when you stand too close to eternity. This place was not hell, not yet. It was the unveiling. The moment when judgment becomes more than theory. When theology stops being a debate and becomes destiny. And what did it reveal? That judgment isn't merely about what is punished. It's about what is separated, the holy from the profane, the true from the false, the surrendered from the rebellious. And if you listen closely to the fire, if you lean in with your spirit and not just your eyes, you'll hear it whisper something ancient. God is not mocked. For every choice, there is consequence. For every rebellion, a reckoning. But here's where everything shifts. Because Enoch wasn't just shown this place to be afraid, he was shown it to understand something deeper. That God's judgment is not fueled by rage, but by love that refuses to lie. Because love without justice isn't love. It's enablement. And Enoch saw that clearly now. All those bound angels, they weren't just prisoners. They were signs. Warnings written in fire, not because God delights in damnation, but because he still hopes someone, anyone, will turn back. Think about that. The Almighty who created galaxies with a word still waits, still longs, still watches over the edge of heaven, hoping that just one soul might choose light before the fire falls. That's what this final fire represents. It is the place where patience ends, where mercy stands aside and lets justice speak. But it also reveals one more thing, that no one falls into it by accident. Every angel who ended up there made a choice. Every human who stands at its edge has been warned, and that is where the weight of Enoch's vision becomes ours. Because we have been warned, not with threats, but with stories, with mercy, with angels, with scripture, with a voice inside our chest that still whispers right from wrong. And the fire, it's not to scare us, it's to wake us. To remind us that eternity isn't a myth, it's the next breath. And while we still have this breath, we have a choice. There's a young boy I once met at a youth camp. He had no father, no family stability, no reason to believe in goodness. But during one night, while a speaker shared this very story about Enoch and the angels and the prison, he leaned over and said, "If God didn't spare the angels, then maybe he's serious." And he wept, not out of fear, but clarity. He saw himself, not as worthless, but as warned, as loved enough to be corrected, as invited to rise before he fell. That boy, he's a pastor now. And he tells that same story, Enoch's story, to others standing at their own edge. Because once you've seen the fire, you can't pretend it doesn't burn. But you can choose not to fall. That's the power of judgment, not to condemn you where you stand, but to compel you to walk another way. And this is where Enoch's vision ends, not with screams, but with silence. A silence heavy with holiness, with opportunity, with invitation. Because while angels are bound forever, while flames roar beneath the surface of time, while stars fall and women turn to sirens, there's one thing still standing. You. Your choice. Your soul. Your chapter. The scroll of Enoch may be closed, but yours is still being written. And the pen is in your hands. So what will you write? Will you wait until the fire proves God right? Or will you believe him now, before the flames, before the fall? Before the final fire finds your name on its lips, the decision isn't for angels anymore. It's for you. It's always been for you. So rise, while there is still light, before judgment stops being a warning and becomes your reality. Some stories don't end when the fire fades. They echo. Long after Enoch turned from the abyss, after the smoke drifted into heaven's veil and the screams of the fallen were lost to eternity, one question lingered in the back of his mind. Not about the angels, but about the women. And the women also of the angels who went astray shall become sirens. Uriel had spoken the words without hesitation. But Enoch, he remembered their faces. He remembered that they weren't just symbols of sin. They were daughters, wives, mothers, flesh and bone. Not ethereal spirits or heavenly creatures, but women who had hearts, who believed promises, who were seduced by something they thought divine. And that is where the tragedy deepens, because when we think of sin, we often imagine rebellion dripping with malice. But sometimes sin wears a softer skin. Sometimes it walks in as love. Sometimes it whispers through trust. Sometimes it feels holy. That was the deception of the Watchers. They didn't come as monsters. They came as angels. And the women? They didn't run. They welcomed them. Perhaps they thought it was God's will. Perhaps they had no choice. Perhaps they were captivated by beauty, by the illusion of being chosen by heaven itself. And who could blame them? When you live in a world ruled by men, when your voice is seldom heard, and your worth is often weighed by who chooses you, what happens when something otherworldly reaches out and says, "You are beautiful to me"? For a moment the divine touched them, or so they believed. And maybe that's why the punishment feels so hard to swallow. To be turned into sirens, not just punished, but transformed into something grotesque, a perversion of their original beauty, a curse that screams through generations. But maybe it wasn't punishment in the way we think. Maybe it was the natural result of loving something unholy. You see, when we give our hearts to that which was never meant to hold them, we don't just break, we become something else. The women weren't cursed because they were evil. They were cursed because they were changed. Changed by intimacy with the fallen, changed by believing lies wrapped in light. And this isn't just their story. It's ours. Every time we trade truth for pleasure, every time we give ourselves, our bodies, our dreams, our trust, to something not sent by God, something seductive but soulless, something that makes us feel seen but leaves us hollow, we become sirens. Not with wings or fishtails, not with songs that lure sailors to their death, but with souls that echo pain instead of peace, hearts that call out for connection but only draw chaos. We may look normal on the outside, but inside we're fragmented, twisted by intimacy that was never divine. And yet, even in that pain, there's a whisper. Because what the Book of Enoch does not say, what it leaves unsaid, is whether the sirens can ever be restored. And maybe that silence is an invitation. Because while the angels who fell are bound forever, while their judgment is sealed, the women, the sirens, are never mentioned again. No second punishment. No final destination, just transformation. And if God can allow transformation into something fallen, might he not also allow transformation back into something holy? That's the hope we carry, that even those who were deceived can be delivered, that even those who gave themselves away can be taken back, that even if your soul sings the wrong song now, it can still learn heaven's melody again. I met a woman once. She had given her heart away too many times, believed too many promises, trusted too many men who spoke like angels but lived like devils. And each time she lost a piece of herself until she no longer recognized her own reflection. But one night, alone and forgotten, she cried out, not to any man, but to God. And he answered, not with thunder, not with judgment, but with silence. And then a still, small voice. You are still mine. It didn't happen overnight. But slowly, the siren's song died within her. And in its place, something sacred grew. Worship, wholeness, wonder. That's why Enoch's story matters. Not because it tells us how far we can fall, but because it shows us how far God is willing to go to warn us and to wait for us. Even the women caught in the wake of angelic rebellion were remembered in the scrolls. That means something. That means you're not forgotten. That means no matter how twisted your past, how loud your regrets, how many lies you've believed, you're not beyond restoration. Not if you still have breath, not if you're still listening, not if your soul still whispers, I want to be whole again, because heaven still hears. And the same God who sent fire to judge angels also sent a Savior to rescue the rest. So if you've walked with shadows, if you've been seduced by things that seemed holy but left you hurting, if you've lost yourself to someone or something that claimed to be light but led you to darkness, then listen closely. You don't have to become the siren. You can become the song, but not just any song, a song of redemption. A song that tells the next woman, the next soul, the next you, you are not what touched you. You are not what used you. You are not what fell for the lie. You are what rises after. And that's where this story turns. Because there's still one name left in the Book of Enoch. One angel, one assignment, the angel of resurrection. The one who waits not at the gates of fire, but at the edge of mercy. The one who is set, not over punishment, but over those who rise. His name is Uriel. And his chapter is the next one we must open. Shall we? The flames have faded. The echoes of judgment, the cries of the chained, the whispers of fallen angels and deceived women, they all begin to soften now. Not because they're forgotten, but because we are nearing the other side of the valley. And standing at that threshold is Uriel. His name isn't shouted in Scripture. He doesn't command armies like Michael. He doesn't deliver thunderous messages like Gabriel. He doesn't hold the keys to chaos or the abyss. Uriel moves quietly. But his calling is monumental. Uriel, one of the holy angels, whom God set over those who rise. Not those who never fell. Not the perfect, not the unscarred, but those who rise. This angel doesn't wait in the heavens. He waits in the aftermath, in the places where you've collapsed, in the spaces between regret and restoration. He stands where the ashes still smoke, but where the first spark of hope has returned, and he reaches down, not with wrath, but with rescue. Because rising isn't about strength. It's about surrender. Uriel doesn't lift those who pretend to be fine. He lifts those who finally whisper, "I'm not." He finds the soul on its knees, buried in failure, cloaked in shame, and he speaks what only heaven could say. You still have a future. You still have a name. You still have breath, so you still have purpose. And maybe that's why God saved him for last. Because the story of Enoch is not just a tale of punishment and prophecy. It is a blueprint of return, a divine map drawn through fire and shadow, ending not in despair, but in resurrection. You see, Uriel was not assigned to guard the holy or judge the wicked. His post is in the middle, in the battleground between who you were and who you're called to be. He stands with the ones still covered in soot, still limping from the fall, still doubting they're worthy to rise again. And he says, "You are." Maybe you've never heard his name before, but maybe you've heard his voice, the whisper that came after your worst mistake. The sudden thought that maybe God still wants you, the unexplainable peace in the middle of your repentance. That was Uriel's post. Because when every other angel was assigned to watch, he was assigned to lift. And there is no lifting unless something has first fallen. That means his assignment, his whole existence, is predicated on your comeback. Isn't that stunning? Heaven expects you to rise. God created an angel, not for your success, not for your perfection, but for your return. I remember meeting a man who had spent 19 years in prison, tattoos on his face, a record thicker than most novels. No one expected anything from him. But one day, in the quiet of his cell, he cried out, not loud, just desperate. And that night, he dreamed. He saw himself drowning. But as he slipped beneath the waters, a hand reached down, radiant, strong, and pulled him up. Not back to where he was, but beyond it, to a shore he had never seen before. When he woke, everything was different. He began to read, to pray, to speak. Now, he leads others, those in prison, those still falling, those who believe they can't rise. He doesn't preach theology. He is the sermon. And if you asked him who that hand belonged to, he would simply smile and say, "I don't know his name, but I think heaven sent someone just for me." I believe that someone was Uriel. And I believe he's still moving, not in grand gestures, but in quiet rescue, in late-night prayers, in tearful worship, in small moments when you feel the weight lift, even if just for a second. So if you've fallen, if you've wandered, if you're still trapped in the shame of what was, hear this: Uriel is not just an angel in a book. He is a promise that failure is not the finale, that you are never too far gone, that God did not build heaven with only gates to keep people out. He also placed angels at those gates to welcome you back in. And as you rise not alone. You rise with the witness of heaven. You rise with the whispers of prophets. You rise with the flame of hope that the abyss could not consume. And above it all, you rise with Uriel, the angel who never left the battlefield, because he wasn't assigned to stand in heaven. He was assigned to wait for you. So now the question is no longer, can you rise? It's, will you? Because he's already reaching, and all of heaven is watching, not to judge, but to rejoice. Let it be today. Let this be your rising. And when it happens, remember the name, Uriel, the angel who was always waiting for this moment. And so we stand at the edge, not the edge of the abyss, not the edge of despair, but the edge of something greater, something eternal, a turning point not defined by what has been, but by what can still be. The angels who fell, the watchers who crossed heaven's boundaries, what happened to them was a warning, a story carved in fire, a reality where the line between righteousness and rebellion was not blurred, but clearly drawn. Yet, even in the darkest corners of that judgment, there was one truth that never faded. God does not abandon his creation. He does not abandon you. Through every fall, every failure, every mistake, there has been one constant. One hand stretched out in mercy, one whisper in the silence. And it is the story of that hand reaching down to you that we must not forget. Because the angels, the watchers, the fallen ones, they are not the only ones being watched. You are. And as you stand in the moments of your life, those moments when you feel like you have failed, like you have fallen too far, remember this. The angels who rose again, the ones who never gave up, those who found hope in the most hopeless places, they did not do it alone. They were watched, they were helped, and like them, you can rise. You can stand again. And when you do, when you finally rise, you will not rise in your own strength. You will rise in the strength of the one who never let you go. The one who sent angels not only to guard, but to help. Because the final story of judgment is not just about fire, not just about the fallen, not even about the abyss. It is about what happens after. It is about what happens when we choose to rise, to seek the light, and to walk in the freedom that has been given to us, not by merit, but by mercy. So what will you do now? Will you continue to stand in the shadow of fear? Or will you step into the light of hope? The angels are waiting, the gates are open, and the time to rise is now. And if you believe that, if you know in your soul that you were meant for more than the chains of this world, then it's time. It's time to answer the call. It's time to join the angels who are not only guarding heaven, but are watching for your rise. If this message has spoken to you, if you have heard the whispers of heaven, and know that it's your time to rise, then do not wait. Take that step. Step into the light. Step into the purpose you were born for, and let the angels rejoice. If you believe in this, if you know that this is your season of rising, then I invite you, subscribe, share, and comment below. Share this message with someone who needs to hear it, someone who needs to know they are not too far gone. Because together we can rise higher, and together we can walk in the freedom we were meant for. Let this be the day you rise. The angels are watching. And so is heaven,